Hey there, folks. Welcome to the All Sooners podcast. I am Parker Thune alongside John Hoover. We do this twice a week, Sundays and Wednesdays, breaking down everything Sooner athletics, which, of course, here in the fall, that's a lot of football, especially this week with Bedlam on the docket. Oklahoma State coming to Owen Field to take on the Sooners and try to reverse the narrative of this rivalry, which Oklahoma has won each of the last 5 seasons. John, this podcast coming at you live from Norman and or Broken Arrow, Norman/Broken Arrow, however you want to consider it. I'm here in Norman. John out there in Broken Arrow. And John, of course, the question that's on everybody's mind this week, Spencer Rattler faces what may be his biggest test to date in terms of defensive strength. Oklahoma State has statistically the Big 12's best defensive unit. Rattler, the redshirt freshman, has demonstrated a bit of a propensity to put the ball in harm's way at times. So, let's start with the obvious. What is your level of confidence that Spencer Rattler can perform to an adequate level against this Oklahoma State defense to get the Sooners the win on Saturday night?
Oh, I think Spencer's going to be good. He's facing a defense that is just amazingly experienced. They've got experience at the defensive line, at linebacker, and at defensive back at every level of the defense. So he's going to have to be careful. But here's the thing: this is not quite the pressure cooker that OU Texas is. And if you think back to that game, 92 degrees in Dallas, Texas, in the Cotton Bowl, 25% full. I remember Spencer Rattler coming out and being rattled, for lack of a better word. I remember him, making those 2 turnovers and fumbling a third time, almost turning it over a third time. And, he's been nothing but careful with the football ever since. He's made good decisions. He hasn't thrown the ball into crowds except the one time he threw it, was it 2 weeks ago against Kansas? He got intercepted after 2 games without a turnover. So, listen, the kid has grown up. I'm not saying he can't make a mistake, and I'm not saying he won't against this experienced and very athletic and talented Oklahoma State defense. I think he probably will. But the difference is the Texas game taught him, hey, there's things in life after you make a turnover. And so he's coming back from that, and playing the way he did in overtime, I think gave him a realization, maybe a perspective that you can make a mistake. It doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. It's not the end of the day. You can come back and win the game. He learned that, and so I think he's kind of grown from that whole turnovers against Texas, getting benched, coming off the bench, and then winning the game.
Now, another thing that Rattler's going to have to come back from with regard to that Kansas game a couple weeks ago, John, is the injury he sustained in the second quarter. He called it a bruise to his hip. It happened, of course, on a second quarter touchdown run in which he took a hit from Kansas safety Ricky Thomas. Now, Lincoln Riley did say in his press conference yesterday Rattler's going to be 100%. Perhaps the bigger concern is the condition of Austin Stogner, whom we didn't get an update on from Riley, John. Now, Sooners obviously extremely deep at the H-back position. They're presumably getting Braden Willis back this week. Jeremiah Hall has been outstanding. He's second on the team in touchdown catches, and Mikey Henderson is quickly emerging as one of the more talented freshmen in the Big 12. But Stogner has been arguably Rattler's go-to guy, John. It's him and Marvin Mims that Rattler has traditionally looked to in third down situations, in the red zone. If Stogner is hobbled, how does that affect Oklahoma's game plan going up against this strong Cowboys unit?
Yeah, and don't forget third down Theo, guy that's caught a lot of third down conversions for them over the last 4 or 5 games. I think it would naturally evolve into other guys getting more footballs, more opportunities. Simple as that. It's not any big secret. The big question for this situation comes with how mobile is he? How mobile is Austin Stogner? Can he move around? Can he plant? Can he cut? Can he get involved in the blocking game and be engaged with a defensive lineman or a linebacker, helping out at the line of scrimmage with what was called basically a bruised knee or bruised knees. We don't know exactly which one or if it's both. So I don't know. We'll have to. That'll be something that that we'll have to wait and see how it evolves. But I think that also could mean more without Stogner out there at the H-back kind of planted. That could mean more opportunities for Jeremiah Hall, who you mentioned, in not necessarily a receiving role, but think of him more as a fullback, and that means more carries for who? Rhamondre Stevenson, which is kind of the equation. If you're Lincoln Riley, if I'm Lincoln Riley and I'm putting this game plan together, everything starts with Rhamondre Stevenson, getting him the football 22, 25, 27 times if necessary, and letting him control the line of scrimmage. Now, does that mean Stogner? If Stogner's out, that means more snaps for Hall and Henderson and those guys. So we'll see what Braden Willis' situation is, and Jalen Conyers and guys like that who haven't been around, haven't been on the field. So we don't know how it's going to play out. But yeah, I think listen, the game plan calls for Rhamondre Stevenson no matter who's playing H-back.
Yeah, you're certainly right about that, and it really should start with Stevenson, given how strong he's been in the run game over the past 2 games since returning from suspension. Of course, 5 total touchdowns on the ground across those 2 contests, and we'll talk more about Stevenson a bit later on. But let's talk now about this Cowboys defense more in depth, John, and I know you love what they bring to the table, especially in terms of their more high-end, high-ceiling skill position players in that defensive backfield. So going up against a guy like Spencer Rattler and going up against a team in Oklahoma and a coach in Lincoln Riley that brings such a unique play-calling style to the table and can beat you in so many different ways. What's the key for Oklahoma State on Saturday night? What do they need to do in order to neutralize the Sooners' offensive attack, be able to turn this game into a defensive struggle, and eventually put themselves in a position to go blow for blow with Oklahoma for 60 minutes in this contest?
You said just right there almost exactly what I was going to say. This Oklahoma State defense is equipped to stand toe-to-toe is what I was going to use with Oklahoma's offense. Oklahoma's offense is dangerous, dynamic, powerful. They're downfield, all that stuff. Oklahoma State's defense is equipped to deal with that. Whether you're talking about the defensive line, guys like Trace Ford, you're talking about, Amen Agbombamiga at linebacker. To me, it starts with Amen and Malcolm Rodriguez at linebacker. They're so solid, they're so active, they're so athletic, and they're so confident in the way they hit and they tackle and pursue and chase and all that stuff. That's where Oklahoma State is able to do some real damage. And then the secondary, you're talking about guys who have played a ton of football. Rodarius Williams is probably 44 consecutive starts, the Big 12's most accomplished or experienced, at least, cornerback in the defensive backfield. You've got safeties who have played. You've got guys who have played in this game before. It's like Lincoln Riley said 3 years ago when this game was played in Norman. Most of the players that are playing for Oklahoma State in this game also played in that game. So they've been through it. They've seen it. They've been to through some tough games, been on the field with some tough opponents, and they've seen Oklahoma twice. And now this is going to be, for some of them, for a lot of them, their 3rd time. A couple of them, their 4th time. So, man, I just think it's going to be – I think when Oklahoma has the football and Oklahoma State is on defense, that is strength on strength. That's going to be the fun part to watch for me.
Yeah, Johnny, you make a really good point, and that's one storyline that I don't think is being talked about enough going into this weekend is how experienced Oklahoma State is as a team compared to Oklahoma. And you can make the argument that, sure, maybe the Sooners are a bit more battle-tested simply because they've been in more big situations, Big 12 championships, college football playoffs, those types of environments, than the Pokes over the last 3 to 4 years. But in reality, there are far more upperclassmen across the 2 deep for Oklahoma State than there are for Oklahoma. There are guys that have been in that system for a period of several years under Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator on that unit specifically. So the Cowboys know what's up, and Oklahoma has some phenomenal young talent, but it's important to consider that another thing to keep in mind here, experienced players generally deal a lot better with hostile road environments, right? And so for the Pokes coming to Norman, it definitely gives them an edge to have the advantage in experience over the Sooners in that capacity. Well, it's also no secret, John. Oklahoma State brings three of the best players in the Big 12 on the offensive side of the football: Spencer Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, Tylan Wallace, a quarterback, running back, and wide receiver trio that rivals most anyone across all of college football. We'll break down what the Sooners defense needs to do to curtail their impact when we come back here on the SI Sooners podcast.
Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman or a car dealership in Oklahoma City or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners.
Well, you can keep up with all the content that we're pushing out throughout the week at SI Sooners over at allsooners.com. You'll find plenty of stories, videos, and of course this podcast, in addition to plenty of other content throughout the week from myself, from John, and from several of our other contributors, Caroline Grace, Kemper Ball. But we've got stuff coming at you every single day, John. 4 to 5 stories at least per day throughout the course of the football season. You can follow John on Instagram at John E. Hoover. You can
or Twitter.
Follow me at Parker Thune. You can hit John up on Facebook, John E. Hoover Media. And for those of you that are watching the podcast on his YouTube channel, that is John E. Hoover Media as well. And if you don't watch it over on YouTube, you might want to go and check that out. But this podcast is, of course, available on just about any podcast streaming platform: Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts. Find it all over the place. We are all over the place. That's because we are the number one site in the network, John. Do we have an update on that?
Comes out once a month, and we were number 2 last month because Nick Saban got COVID.
Well, that'll do it.
So we'll take number 2 right now. You know, at the end of the season, we're going to be back at number 1. We're going to be going to chase the Natty. That's you know, it's not how you play in October and November, Parker. It's how you play in December and January. So that's what we're chasing.
That's right. We'll chalk it up to SEC bias for now. Well, John, I want to start this conversation regarding the Oklahoma defense here on the SI Sooners podcast with the secondary, because let's face it, if Tylan Wallace is a go on Saturday, which it looks like right now that will be the case, if Tylan Wallace is a go, that is the single biggest matchup nightmare that the Sooners will have to face all season, because when Tylan Wallace is healthy, he is the best wide receiver in college football. And obviously the bread and butter of this offense is Chuba Hubbard. We'll get to him in a second. But especially with how maligned this secondary has been in recent years, is there a chance, John, that the trust that they've built in the eyes of Sooner Nation over the last 3 games and the good juju that they've cultivated over those 3 contests, is there a chance that Tylan Wallace shows up on Saturday and kind of brings them back to earth?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely a chance. If he plays, he's so good. He's incredibly dangerous. Just, 2 years ago when he played in Norman, 10 catches, 220 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was unbelievable. And he had that kind of productivity all season. Probably should have won the Biletnikoff in 2018. Well, that was Mike Stoops' defensive backfield. Those were Ruffin McNeil's guys, as the coordinator that game. So this OU team, Alex Grinch, Roy Manning, they're a little different. They're a little different than what, Tylan Wallace had his success against 2 years ago. They're different, but they're the same. I mean, it's the same 2 safeties as struggled last year, Pat Fields and Delaren Turner-Yell. They're playing better this year. Trey Brown was on the field that day. Pretty sure Norwood was on the field that day. Those guys are all going to play against Tylan Wallace on Saturday, so it's going to be hard. Trey Brown, they're going to move Tylan Wallace around, try to get him in matchup situations, try to get him to split a safety in a corner when they bracket him, things like that. But Trey Brown's going to have one of the best games of his career, if not the best game. And that's something that is he ready his senior year to have the game of his life against Oklahoma State? I think the potential is there. But as you said, Tylan Wallace could be the best receiver in the country. Trey Brown feels like he's up for the challenge. I don't know if he is.
Now, well, here's what I'll ask you, John. Do you think it's a definitive that Trey Brown draws that assignment against Tylan Wallace, or could you see it go to Jaden Davis, or even a guy like Woody Washington, a safety-turned-quarterback who's been so good in coverage lately?
Yeah, Woody's replaced Jaden the last 2 games, so I'd say Woody's taken over that job. It looks like he has won the job from Jaden Davis. So, Woody's physical. He's quick. He's sudden when he moves. He's got long arms. He's confident with the ball in the air. You saw him knock the ball down, a 1 deep ball, I think, against Texas, and then the interception on the fade route against Texas in the end zone. That's the kind of ball that Tylan Wallace thrives on. So you might be right. Woody could be the guy that draws the most reps against Tylan. Again, I've seen Tylan go up against some really good cornerbacks and defeat the coverage, no matter what they had. Guys swatting at the ball bouncing around, hands hitting him in the face. He still takes the football down to the ground with him. So Tylan Wallace is really good. He's going to have plenty of opportunities, whether it's Trey Brown in man-to-man coverage or Woody Washington or Jaden Davis or some combination of the 3.
Now, John, here's where the Sooners could have an advantage. According to Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma has a wide receiver among that receiving core that is very, very similar to Tylan Wallace in terms of skill set, and he's preparing the defensive backs to go up against Wallace this weekend. Here's what Riley had to say about the individual that the Sooners are using to scout for Wallace.
Oh, our players are used to going against good receivers, but I don't know anybody's exactly, can you carbon copy a guy? His strengths, weaknesses, all that. Tylan doesn't have very many weaknesses. As far as a skill set, the guy we have that's most like him is he and Trajan Bridges are their games are very, very, very similar, remarkably similar in my opinion. It's our guys get to go up against good receivers, but Tylan's tremendous and does some, he does some things very, very well that are difficult to defend. So I'm glad that our guys get to go up against good receivers, but it's going to matter what they do on Saturday night. And he's like I said, we got a lot of respect for him, a tremendous player, and certainly have a lot of respect for the, challenge of trying to contain him.
So there you go, John. Trajan Bridges is apparently as close to a carbon copy of Tylan Wallace as they come. Lincoln Riley said, remarkably similar are the two. So how much does that help Oklahoma heading into Bedlam?
Yeah, my tweet went out. I just happened to get it out early, and some Oklahoma State writers got a hold of it and put it up. A friend of mine who's an Oklahoma State fan said, congratulations, your tweet made an OSU message board. So people were coming, not at me, but at Lincoln Riley for saying this guy who never plays, and that a lot of Oklahoma State fans, I guess, have never heard of. Former 5-star recruit Trajan Bridges is as close as Oklahoma has in a good representation, very similar, remarkably similar to the best receiver in the country, arguably. So that was something. How much does it help OU? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that what I saw out of Trajan Bridges his freshman year was anything close to what we've seen out of Tylan Wallace at the top of his game. It wasn't. But, here's the other side of that coin. Lincoln Riley knows just a bit more about football than I do. So if he's calling it, if he's saying that Trajan Bridges is that close in a matchup and can represent Tylan Wallace on scout team and give his DBs a good look, if he's saying it, do we really have reason to not believe him? I don't think so.
There's certainly a case there, John, but at the same time, I don't know if Trajan Bridges or anybody across college football, for that matter, is quite as talented as Tylan Wallace. Like I said, I think when he's healthy, he is the biggest difference maker. He is the finest wide receiver across the nation. Now, let's talk about the other guy that Oklahoma State has on offense, the guy that everything revolves around, Chuba Hubbard in the backfield, who rushed for over 2,000 yards last year. And we haven't quite seen the same eye-popping production from him this season. That's due in large part to plenty of attrition and turnover across the Oklahoma State offensive line. Now, one of the Sooners' biggest strengths, especially in recent weeks and since the return of Ronnie Perkins, has been the defensive front four. They've been able to stuff the run. They've been able to get after the passer. However, here's what Alex Grinch said about Chuba Hubbard. He said, he's a guy that can get bottled up 5-6 carries in a row, then pop off for a long gain and make you forget about the 5 or 6 times that you were able to knock him down at the line of scrimmage. That's how good he is. So this is very much, as you mentioned last segment, John, strength on strength. What does Oklahoma State have to do to overcome the Sooners' strength in that area? And on the flip side, what does Oklahoma have to do to overcome the Cowboys' strength?
Yeah, that's good. Good question, Parker. Chuba he's not been as dynamic. Okay, I'm not saying I'm not slandering him or anything like that here. He's not been as dynamic in 2020 as he was in 2021. A lot of that is on the offensive line. A lot of it is on the offensive line. Some of it's on the fact that his quarterback was missing for part of the season as well when Spencer Sanders got hurt in the opener against Tulsa. 145 yards a couple weeks ago. 148 is his season high the week after that. He's had 4 100-yard games. So it looks like Chuba might be trying at this point in the season to round into shape. You would hope that's the case, that he's, mid-season toward the back third of the season, that he's kind of peaking a little bit for Oklahoma State. But no, he's just not been as dynamic. And man, listen, here's the deal. On the offensive line, they have been, I was going to say the season opener. Since the season opener, they've been in disarray. But the fact is, they've been in disarray since July. Okay, listen to this. Mike Gundy, talked to him on the Big 12 call this week. He called it musical chairs. All right, here we go. Cole Birmingham was the starter at right guard. Hunter Anthony was the starter at right tackle. That's just the season opener against Tulsa. They both got hurt. Neither guy has been back. So Tevin Jenkins started the season at left tackle, slides over to right tackle. What that does, that puts Jake Springfield, who is a redshirt freshman and former walk-on, out at left tackle. Well, what happens against Texas? Springfield gets hurt. He doesn't play last week against Kansas State, last game. So Josh Sills, remember the grad transfer from West Virginia, he's been playing left guard all season. Josh Sills has to slide out to left tackle, and now the left guard is Preston Wilson, who's another redshirt freshman. Meanwhile, Jenkins, remember, slided over, I should say, from left tackle, slid over to right tackle. Well, he got hurt against Kansas State, and we don't know his status exactly, if he's going to be 100% or what. He's their best blocker. He's an NFL guy, okay? He's an all Big 12, All-American candidate kind of guy. Whoever plays that spot, whether it's Jenkins or his backup, who's true freshman Eli Russ, whoever plays that spot has got to block Ronnie Perkins, and when Ronnie Perkins is taking a breather, Isaiah Thomas, presumably. And this all comes after the preseason that I mentioned, which we started this with 2 returning starters and one of their top backups left the team. Dylan Galloway was the left guard. He opted out, retired from football in July. And then in August, right guard Bryce Bray and backup Jacob Farrell were both dismissed from the team for violating team policy. Bryce Bray ended up transferring to Tulsa. But, I mean, you're going to bring those guys? And you're going to try to block Oklahoma? OU's now ranked 8th in the nation in quarterback sacks, I think 3.7 per game. And OU's also 13th in the country in tackles for loss, with at more than 8 tackles per loss per game. And in the past 4 games, they're averaging like 11 tackles for loss. So, listen, this is not a good matchup for Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy said on the conference call, he said on Monday at his press conference, and he said on the conference call Monday that they're young guys, they're getting better, but yes, he has concern about Oklahoma State's offensive line, because right now OSU is 93rd in the nation in sacks allowed, 2.8 per game. So this is not a favorable matchup for Oklahoma State. This is an area on the field, Parker, where Oklahoma can feast.
And they certainly will, John. And Alex Grinch said today, strong defensive play and turnovers start with strong play up front and winning the battle at the line of scrimmage. And Oklahoma is definitely in a position to do that, much more so than Oklahoma State. So if the Pokes are to win on Saturday, they're going to have to overcome that in a very big way. Coming up next here on the SI Sooners podcast, Rhamondre Stevenson grew up idolizing a fellow very close to the Oklahoma program. In fact, he's a member of it. We've got that story and more for you next here on the SI Sooners podcast.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
John, we gleaned a very interesting tidbit from Rhamondre Stevenson yesterday in his Zoom press conference. Come to find out, Stevenson grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan, which means in his early teen high school years, he grew up watching DeMarco Murray, who's now his running backs coach at the University of Oklahoma. And he admitted that he was a little bit starstruck when Murray accepted the job this past offseason to come to Oklahoma, having grown up watching Murray become the offensive player of the year for the Dallas Cowboys. That was a season he said he remembered very vividly. It was very complimentary of the way that Murray runs the ball. And I think it's pretty clear, John, you can see Murray's influence in the way that Stevenson carries the ball. So in terms of what Stevenson's ceiling is, and he cited Murray as a tremendous impact on his running style and said he's made such a tremendous impact on him thus far in only a year with the program. So obviously having your idol as your position coach, John, I have to imagine that's a pretty enviable situation. And that may be why Rhamondre Stevenson has jumped up NFL draft boards and emerged, even after just 2 games here in 2020, as one of the premier running backs in the country.
Parker, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we already hear this sort of out of an OU running back? It wouldn't have been McGowan because we don't get to talk to freshmen. Didn't TJ Pledger say pretty much the same thing when he found out he was that DeMarco had been hired? His family started texting him and tweeting him and calling him saying, "Hey man, your coach is now DeMarco Murray." Am I misremembering that?
I'm not sure, John. We'll have to go back and check the transcripts on that one. But there's a very good. I mean,
I think that's the case.
Yeah, anybody that grew up watching Oklahoma play football knows how much DeMarco Murray means to this program, and especially given the fact that he's only 32 years old and 3 years removed from his NFL career. He's a name that most running backs of those guys' age are going to be pretty familiar with.
DeMarco could still play. He could play right now, and he looks like it, and he walks like it and talks like it. I wanted to when you got a couple of minutes with Rhamondre at the end of the call about this, I wanted to jump in and say, hey, was there any awkward moments where you're like, looking at your coach like, wow, that's DeMarco Murray, and he's like trying to get your attention, snapping you back into reality, like, hey, are you paying attention? Trying to drill you as a running backs coach and not, DeMarco Murray. I just thought that would be funny if there were any, like, hey, coach, after the meeting, can I have your autograph? Like something like that. How cool would that be? But silly moments, I'm sure. But you're right, man. There's a reason that he runs a little like DeMarco. He's a big, powerful, strong, fast guy. He probably watched DeMarco, in junior high and high school and thought, that's how I want to run. Because DeMarco was like 6 foot, maybe 210, 205 sometimes. That's how he ran. He would lower his shoulder. I used to be afraid for him that he's trying to run over a 325-pound guy, and sometimes he would, but he never, ever shied away from contact, except for that one time he jumped over Joe John Finley and went 65 yards against Texas.
Yeah, John, Rhamondre Stevenson, I would say, much better equipped than DeMarco Murray to absorb contact, given that he stands 6 feet and tips the scales at about 245 pounds. So you look at Rhamondre Stevenson, You can liken him to DeMarco Murray plus 40 pounds, which is a very nice skill set to have, especially in Lincoln Riley's system when you know you're going to be getting 10 to 15 touches a game at least. Get some space in the open field and have the opportunity to bowl some guys over, make some guys miss, which is something that Rhamondre Stevenson is very, very good at. Last thing on the docket for the SI Sooners podcast today, John. Just found out earlier this afternoon that Texas and Kansas, who were scheduled to play this Saturday, have postponed their matchup until December 12th. And we continue to see a widespread sweep of COVID cancellations and postponements across college football. John, it seems like the pandemic is starting to surge back and start to affect the college football schedule a lot more than it was even at the beginning of the year in weeks 1 and 2 when we saw quite a few cancellations. Now, it hasn't hit the Big 12 as hard. It seems like the SEC and the Big 10 have struggled more with the pandemic in recent weeks than other conferences, and some of that is to be expected just by virtue of the fact that they were late to the game in the reacclimation process and getting their season off the ground. So there was going to come a bump in the road for those conferences at some point. But I want to ask you, John, is this going to start to wreak havoc on the Big 12's schedule for the rest of the year and potentially the race for the championship? If, say, you have a team with only 9 games on their schedule at the end of the year versus one that has 10, and what kind of chaos and what kind of impact could this have on a Big 12 championship race that is every bit as crowded as it could possibly be at this point?
Yeah, how does it get more convoluted than what it is right now? We've spent the past, since Oklahoma turned around against Texas, we've spent the past couple of weeks examining what the Big 12's tiebreaker procedures are. Net points and record against the top teams and record against the bottom. None of that may end up mattering because you could be going on straight win percentages. When, like you said, one team plays 9 games and another one plays 8 or 7 or 6. I think most teams have gotten 6 in already, but man, it's too bad that this is going to cloud things and cause controversy. I saw where Bob Bowlesby told Kirk Bowles from the Austin American-Statesman today on their podcast that I think 4 of the games that were delayed in the SEC last week, the teams were coming off of an open date. Big 12 just had its 3rd open date, where 6 teams had last weekend off and 4 teams got to play. Well, this week, 4 teams are off, and the other 6 that were off last week are now playing. This could be the thing right here, where you've pinpointed it down to, you were off last week. Oh crap! Now you got COVID this week. Now the team you played against this week, you're going to have to quarantine them. And probably postpone that game and probably bump the next game, and then we're going to end up with an odd number of games. It's just a mess. And it makes you wonder, was it, the election, building up to it, the rallies, people going out to the polls, people getting comfortable maybe with the idea that they can go out and eat, or they can, which the Hoover family has done once or twice, getting food all the time from restaurants that maybe the people working in the restaurants have been exposed to COVID. It's just we've gotten kind of comfortable, and we've gotten kind of maybe I almost want to say complacent. Not really, but certainly from where we were in the summer. And I think that's why we're starting to see this spike. And I can imagine what it's like now. Project that onto a college campus. What those young people are saying. Listen, I'm stir crazy. I got to get out of here. I was saying that today in this little cramped office of mine. I got to get out of here. Alas, I stayed firm and held strong, and here we are podcasting.
Yeah, John, and it's going to be so interesting to see how it plays out over the next month or so, especially with regard to the race for conference championship berths. You think about the Indiana-Ohio State game. That's a game right now that's essentially going to decide the Big Ten East. And I saw a Nebraska writer throw it out there on Twitter last weekend, John. If Indiana had canceled the game against Ohio State, the Hoosiers would have essentially won the Big Ten East, because Ohio State would have had only 7 games on their schedule at that point, and Indiana is, of course, 4-0 in conference. And so there's so much that goes into this, and there's so many opportunities for the system to be taken advantage of in that sense. And hopefully that doesn't happen. Like Lincoln Riley said earlier this week, hopefully everybody is doing everything they can to play these games. And hopefully, if we need to cancel these games, hopefully they're being canceled for the right reasons. And
did you happen to see also in the Big Ten West, same story? Wisconsin's only played 2 games. Northwestern plays them. If they cancel, Wisconsin doesn't have enough games. If Northwestern gets COVID and has to cancel, Wisconsin doesn't have enough games. Bam, Northwestern wins the West. I mean, you mentioned it. Lincoln Riley said, hopefully we get these games in and we do this thing right. Hopefully there's no hijinks, because I'm like you. I'm calling hijinks if somebody suddenly cancels.
All we can do is count on good faith from the head coaches, the athletic directors, the athletic programs across the country that are all involved in making this very unique 2020 college football season as smooth and as effective as possible, as much so as is possible given the circumstances amidst a pandemic. That's going to do it for us here on the SI Sooners podcast. You can listen to this wherever you hear your podcasts: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google, or of course on our website, allsooners.com, which is where you can keep up with all of our stories, all of our content throughout the week. For John Hoover, I am Parker Thune. We'll see you Sunday on the next installment of the SI Sooners podcast.